Hello my quilting friends! My name is Leah Day and welcome to Quilted and Bound. This is a fun video and article series put together with Quiltmaker Magazine and the Grace Company. In this video, I want to teach you all about straight line quilting using the Ditcher ruler. There's of course lots of different ways that you can stitch straight lines on your quilt with a long arm or a home machine on a frame. But using the Ditcher ruler is one of the fastest and easiest way to get perfect spacing of all your lines. So the very first step, at least to establish my line pattern in this area, is to do some echo ditching. This is stitching a 1/4 inch away from a seam line or a ditch. So here is a seam line on this block. I'm going to line up my Ditcher ruler, and this is where the etched lines on the ruler really come in handy. I line up the ruler so that the edge of it here is lined up with that seam line, and I can also line up some of these etched lines with the straight lines that I've already stitched. So I know that this line is going to be stitched nice and straight across. Click on the machine and pull it to the side. Now, here's the thing about ruler quilting. You got to be careful about your pressure. So yes, I'm holding the ruler down and I'm putting nice pressure with my fingertips down on the quilt, but I'm not putting so much pressure that I stop the machine from moving. You know, if I really press down firmly, I can actually feel that when I'm pulling the handlebar over, and it can feel a little challenging to move the machine itself if I'm pressing too hard with my fingertips. I also like to hook my thumb like this on the edge of the ruler just so that it's not going to slip downward and I'm sure that I have good control over it. Now again, I can use these etched lines on the ruler where I have the ruler here connected to the edge of the ruler foot. I want to keep those two together, but over here I want to use an etched line so that the line stays nice and straight through this area where I don't have seam allowance to line it up. All right, that looks good. Click on the machine. Again, careful pressure. There we go. So stitch down. Now I'm going to rotate the ruler and I'm going to travel stitch up. Travel stitching is stitching right on top of a previous line of stitching. It's definitely allowed in quilting. It's not a technique that we need to be able to do. Otherwise, we'll be breaking thread constantly, and that can be time consuming. Now, I stitched up so that my foot was a 1/4 inch away from that line I just stitched. I am lining up the etched line that is 1 from the edge on my ruler, and that is guiding lines that are spaced 1/2 inch apart. So before I was doing spacing a 1/4 inch away from the seam line, now I'm doing spacing that's 1/2 inch apart. All right, so that space is fully quilted. Now I'm going to travel stitch down and I'm going to be able to stitch across that blue rectangle. So again, travel stitching, careful stitching. Now I've used mostly that shape here on this side. That's my favorite, but you can also use this slot to line up too. So in this case, I'm lining up just the interior of that plus that etched line. I need to stitch down just a little bit to be accurate. That looks good. The reason I don't use this one as much is because I have just less space to stitch before I have to stop and reposition the ruler again. But you can see how handy that is as far as having that control. It really does give you really great control over that line in short little segments. But it takes just a little bit longer to stitch, so that's why I tend to use this side slot. This one's my favorite. And in this case, what I'm lining up is this etched line that's kind of on this little arm here. There's an etched line up at the top and up at the top here. I also have straight lines right through the middle of that area, and I can just visually line that up and see, hey, that whole thing is lined up nice and straight. Super simple. And the biggest key with ruler quilting, and I know it seems really simplistic, but the biggest key with ruler quilting is to keep the foot lined up with the edge of the ruler. And that's really the biggest thing, because it's very easy to just wing off and start quilting in all different directions. because of course we're still free motion quilting. We still have that ability. We're just trying to rein it in by using our ruler. So now let me show you actually how it looks whenever you stitch with the ruler to the back. This isn't impossible. It's just not all that comfortable. It's not my favorite, I should say. Definitely a possibility though. If you have to in your quilt, not a big deal. Just try and find the position where you can keep your hand positioned on the ruler, get that nice careful pressure downward without putting too much pressure on the machine and stopping it from moving, but also not such light pressure that the ruler slips out of position. So a lot of times I'll just keep it lined up with the ruler foot, and it's the end of the ruler that I'll wiggle back and forth until I see the etched line has lined up with my stitching and I'm in the right spot. As you can see, straight line quilting is very simple. It's a very easy thing to do on your quilts, but it's not one of the fastest choices. So if you're on a time limit on your quilt, you might want to pick a different all over quilting design. But if you have a little bit more time and effort to put into quilting, I think planning a design like I did on this easy weave quilt and stitching perfectly spaced straight lines is a great choice. It's kind of like the little black dress of quilting. It's always in fashion, it's always in style, it's always gonna look great. So I hope that you enjoyed learning how to quilt straight lines with me with the Ditcher ruler. If you'd like to read more about this, definitely check out the January-February 2023 issue of Quiltmaker magazine. Until next time, let's go quilt.